Today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Jason Arntz, four-time Olympia contender, finished in the top 6. He was an NPC overall champion, two-time USA back-to-back champion, 2 different weight classes in consecutive years. So Mr. Jason Arntz competed in the 90s era of bodybuilding. I want to talk a little bit about that time frame.
The pro ranks, they didn't introduce the 202-pound class till 2008. In 2007, they did a one-time show, I believe it was 210, over 210 and under. And I think it was a trial, but apparently it was a success. Good turnout, and it actually gave a lot of the smaller guys an opportunity to showcase. And there's, in that era, I mean, even 2008, and before that, there's been dozens and dozens of bodybuilders that get overlooked, that have great physiques, but they just can't stand, next to some of the bigger guys. They just get outclassed. And there's a few and far between that do manage, like your Sean Rays or Lee Priest, Lee Labradas, through the history of the sport, that do manage to, put a stamp and put a dent into the top, top seedings at the Olympia. But a lot of the other guys do get overlooked and do get outclassed. So the 210 show in 2007 was a success. I get a phone call from one of the higher ups in the IFBB at the time, asking me if, do you think you can make 202 pounds? Because at that time I was competing in the pro, as a pro, and there was no weight class. So I was trying to get heavier and heavier to be competitive, as a pro. And it was getting harder and harder, but when I heard, they could make it 202, I was like, dude, this is perfect for me, because I trained probably as a heavyweight, but I was only 203 pounds winning the nationals, the NPC nationals. So I'm used to sucking down to make weight, so that wasn't a challenge for me. Plus I was a wrestler, and majority of my life, and then I'm used to making weight. But it opened a whole new window of opportunities for me to compete as a pro, and just added, that element of excitement that I've missed since my amateur career. Because as a pro, I turned pro in '98, and I spent the early 2000s, struggling to make top 5, top 10 in some of the bigger pro shows. So when you train for that, you lose your direction a little bit. You lose your drive, because you're competing against guys like Ronnie Coleman, and Flex Wheeler, and Kevin LeBron, and Chris Cornell. There's some of the great names that have come through this sport. So you're fighting just to get a top 5 call out. That's what you're training for. But when they introduced a new class, I said, this is something I could do well in. Now I'm training to win. So it opened up a whole new window of opportunities, like I said, and just put a fire under me that had been missing for years.
Absolutely. Now we have a 212 weight class, and someone like Flex Lewis, who just dominated that sport. I think he did what you did, and he said, you know what? Instead of going to the open, I'm going to try something that's suited more towards me, and he dominated. And so, did you only do the 202, or did you also?
So Flex and I came our first Olympia together. He took third, I took fourth. It was in the 202s. So he went through that transition. He was a 202 guy also. In the year 2012, they introduced, they were going to make the 202-pound class 212. At that point, I was already 39 years old. I just had my second daughter. My wife and I just bought a house. I started a different company. And I just spent the past 4 or 5 years not taking as much stuff as I would have to take to get bigger. Now I can maintain what I have. I don't have to load up on gear, in the off season, and create any type of health issues. So it's like, for me, when I heard they were making it 212, I was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to just, put all this stuff back in my body to gain an additional 10 pounds, just like everybody else. And the placings are all going to be the same. We're just going to be 10 pounds heavier. So I thought that was a good time for me to get out. So I took the year 2012 off because of the birth of my daughter. But then I came back in 2013. It's when me and a bunch of other guys started the company. And I was like, maybe I'll do this for the company, help promote the company. But my heart wasn't in it. I did a show and had a poor showing, and I just retired. So I retired when they introduced the 212s. But then you have a guy like Flex Lewis where, hey, that kid still had room to grow. I was 39. I was maxed out. I was, at the end of my prime. So it was a good opportunity for me to go in a different direction.
Back before YouTube, you had the Muscle and Fitness magazine.
Yeah.
You had Ronnie Coleman coming out on the cover, Jay Cutler, things like that. I remember Phil Heath when he was coming out, and I was like, these guys are monstrous, absolutely massive. And in comparison to the 90s, you had that V-taper aesthetic, you had a different type of, that seems almost attainable, right? That beach, like, I can look like that, it's attainable, versus like, I'm never gonna look like Ronnie Coleman. These guys are way too big. Right. Who inspired you when you started off in your career and you said, I want to look like this guy?
So I grew up, in the area where, Lee Labrado was a name, Sean Ray was up and coming, Rich Gaspari, which I wasn't a huge fan of his shape, but he was a New Jersey guy also, and his conditioning was spot on, so that was very inspiring. But I like the guys with the better shapes, the more athletic. I was always an athlete, so I wanted to have that type of athletic look, and transition that into just a bigger version of being a bodybuilder. I wanted to always maintain my mobility and flexibility and athleticism, so I would keep on top of that. But those were the guys that that I inspired to be like. But I knew I had my own look. We all have our own looks, and I never really wanted to look like anyone else. I just wanted to be the best version of myself that I could possibly be. But you mentioned Flex Lewis. This was a prime time for him. He's younger than me, obviously, but he made that run for the 212 Olympias, and he has backed out since then. I think from having had a child and had a couple health issues or injuries. He's been relatively quiet about it, but he was one of those guys that could have made that transition, just like a Derek Lunsford this year. And probably dominate. He probably could have dominated, the open class as well, like he did in the 212 class.
Are you thinking of them like guys that slow down, like we were talking about earlier before we started, that muscle maturity, right? Sometimes it looks, when you can see, that guy's got that density in his muscles versus an enhanced look that's just very, it doesn't look like they put in that time.
So that's the thing, is that muscle maturity type of look, that hard, gritty, earned muscle look. And a lot of that is missing lately. This year I think it's going to be a little different, but you have a guy like Nick Walker who, there's guys that, and of course you can train for it, and of course it's something that comes with time, but there are guys, there are a select few, they just have it. They just genetically have it. Nick's one of those guys. He just has that hard-earned, that he fought for every ounce of muscle he has on his body. And then you have some of these other guys that are overly enhanced. And I'm not sure if their lack of looking, that they're missing muscle maturity, is due to the fact that they're either not working hard enough, or their enhancements are too much, or they're not dieting down properly, or they're not actually dehydrating some of these saturated cells with some of the hormones that might retain a little water and then might give them a little extra film, subcutaneously over the muscle between the skin.
In that era, you typically maintained a lean physique throughout the whole year. Were you one of those guys that said, I'd rather try and be as in shape as possible, as opposed to some guys that say, I'm doing an off season. I remember seeing those crazy transitions, like Priest would look, huge, Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler in the off season, but then they would cut, and it's like, I think you would maintain like a more lean physique throughout. Why was that your approach? And you can talk about that.
Yeah, so a couple of reasons actually. One of them is probably as politically correct as you can get, and this probably was one of the main reasons is, I did not feel the need, or did not see the percentage in having all this extra body fat. I didn't understand how that could incorporate and help me build more muscle in the off season. I always felt like if you eat quality food, you're going to put on quality muscle. If you eat crap food, you're going to look crappy, right? Of course, you do need to be in a positive nitrogen balance and have, create good protein synthesis, but you could do that with just overextending the calories from good sources. And particularly, I didn't enjoy, being too heavy in the off season. Like I said, I wanted to be able to move. There was one time I was 238 pounds, and I was in the off season and still in shape, but I'm out of breath tying my shoes, and walking up a flight of steps. I mean, that can't be good, and the pressure on your heart. So I was always looking more long term, and I was able to put on quality muscle while staying lean. But I also didn't want to kill myself and have to sacrifice over dieting to lose all the body fat that a lot of these guys, were putting on in the off season, where they got to start 20 weeks out or 6 months out, or 15 weeks out, I put things in place, and 12 weeks I could be in shape.
I remember I was a big fan of the Animal brand when Evan said the potty came out and Frank McGrath, the huge farms and stuff. And so when I would read those magazines, and maybe you can do a myth buster here, a lot of times, they would say like, oh, you got to eat 2-3 grams of protein per body, lean muscle. And I'm doing the math, and I'm like, dude, that's 600 grams of protein a day. Like, what was your diet like, your macros, and is that something that's sustainable long term, for example, for longevity purposes, or is it only just for someone that's looking at bodybuilding it out?
Well, certainly not. There is nothing good long term about eating 600 grams of protein a day. It took me a while, and that's not a myth. We would do that. We would eat 2 grams per pound of body weight. I was maybe 225 pounds in the off season, 230 pounds in the off season. So you're talking almost 500 grams of protein a day. However, my fat sources were relatively low to moderate, and my carb sources were relatively low to moderate. So if you're looking from a point of view where you want to stay in shape, the best kind of calories to increase from would be protein, because they have a harder time being converted to body fat as opposed to carbohydrates and fats, which obviously those are energy sources, so they're going to get stored. Protein is really hard to store as energy. Usually it's utilized right away to help replenish muscle tissue, damaged tissue. It is possible, but if you're eating a substantial amount of carbohydrates, if you're eating a substantial amount of fats, and you're eating all that protein also, you're gonna get out of shape. I'm not sure what those guys were doing. Obviously, I know their off seasons were a little heavier than mine, so they're probably doing a wide variety of calories from all 3 sources.
What were some of your favorite protein sources?
I was a big red meat guy. I eat red meat sometimes twice a day, chicken twice a day, eggs twice a day. We didn't use the powders. The powders didn't come into play until later on in my career when I started incorporating protein powders. And they were like, they helped. They were a treat. They were a delight, because there's only so much food you can eat, and it gets monotonous, and it's tough on your digestive system. So like we were talking before, long term, it took me a while for my system to normalize again after eating all that food, and now I eat a minimal amount of protein that I used. I mean, I still probably do 250 grams of protein a day, 200 grams of protein a day. But again, my carbohydrates are relatively low, my fats are low, so I know it's utilized. But the gas you would get from consuming all that protein, and the usage of the bathroom, it's a lot. It's a lot for your body to process, and it's not something you definitely want to do long term. It's for a purpose. You have a few years, or try to make a career out of this. You beat your body up as much as you can, and get the fuck out of life healthy.
Absolutely. Jay Cutler, there's a YouTube video where he's just eating, and he's like, I'm not eating for taste, I just gotta eat this. Yeah. What would you do when you got to that point where you're like, man, I still got 3 meals left in the day, my stomach hurts, I'm bloated. How would you overcome that?
So that was the worst part, is, especially towards the end where you're just exhausted and you don't want to eat. But there was times I would take, grilled chicken and put it in a blender with some water and lemon juice and just swallow it down. Wow. Just get tired of chewing, your jaw hurts, but you got to get it in you. Yeah, I mean, there's times it would take me an hour to eat my meal. And then you're like, shit, did I eat again in 2 more hours? It's like, you know, you just want to break. Like you hear about these cheat meals, I know you want to talk about that. But for me, after a show, I didn't want to eat anymore. I don't want to fucking eat anymore. Like I'll have a burger and fries, and I'm good, leave me alone. Like, I just want to drink and hydrate and feel healthy again, you know. But consuming that food was the toughest part. The funny thing is, earlier in my career, as an amateur, your metabolism's faster. Maybe it's just part of aging where your metabolism slows down a little bit, but I was starving all the time. So I never got tired of eating. But then there was a switch that happened, and I'm not sure what point it was, but you know, you're like, shit, dude, I don't want to eat anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about, you know, when you're talking about that aging process, as you start to get older, someone that's in their, you know, mid-30s, or Sean wrote in the recipes, you know, he was an older guy, and he I think he was 40, 42 when he won Mr. O. And I'm thinking, how is someone like that at that age consuming so much food and being as big as everybody around him? Now we have supplements, right? And I know you have your own line. Now I don't think it's as necessary to eat as everything. Sometimes you can supplement, but I think that there's also a abuse almost, where they say, you know what, instead of eating real food, I'm gonna take 3 scoops of protein and I'm good. And it's like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, don't get me wrong, I love supplements. I create them, I make them for a living. You know, it's how I earn a living. But if you can eat real food, you will be better off. Supplements are exactly what they are. They're supplements. It's to add to supplement things in. And I always looked at this because when I was competing, this is how I got into the supplement side of things. Is all right, we're all dieting. You know, this whole group of guys I'm competing against, we're all training our asses off. We're all taking the same stuff, right? We're all working hard. We're all eating the same foods. What's going to make me different? What's going to make me better? You look for any kind of edge you can. So for me, it was always like, all right, I'm going to outwork them, you know, I'm going to out-condition them, and I'm going to outwill them. So I started learning about what foods can incorporate in, what amino acids can incorporate in, and the timing of the amino acids, and the essential amino acids when they play more of a vital role in creating better protein synthesis for your body. So I started getting into the science of this and the chemistry of this. And I was like, look, if I could increase my gain by 8% by adding supplements, fuck, dude, I'll do it. But it's only about, you know, anywhere between 5 and 10%. But at that level, you know, that's a huge advantage. And at the time, nobody else was really doing this. I used to make my own I have an intra-workout now. But I used to create my own because we didn't have, you know, the compounds that are around now. I would use a waxy means, carbohydrate, which I wouldn't use that anymore. You know, they didn't really make essentials. They had branch chains, but essentials you have to buy them all individually and put them all together. You know, and create a pathway to get them into your cells while you're training, because that's when your body is fueling off itself. It's when you're tearing cells down. You know, if you cut your arm, right, your body's not going to wait for you to get home and put some peroxide on it, and put some Neosporin on it, and band-aid it up. The healing process starts right away with the inflammation. The bleeding goes there, it forms a clog, then it forms a clot, then the synthesis occurs, and it starts mending the skin together. Same thing with your muscle cells. While you're training the way we did, these cells are breaking down. So if you get those nutrients in there right away, not only are you going to recover better in the long term, but you will recover better in between each set for the duration of your workout.
Absolutely. So, there was an interview where they were talking to Kai Green about the difference of being a weightlifter and being a bodybuilder. So you have guys that are moving some massive weight. There's the outliers, like for example, Nick Walker's out here bench pressing over 500 pounds, and it's like, well, he's a big guy, right? And even Kai Green, like he's Jefferson squatting 315, or Jefferson the one way with 2 legs. And how true is that in your experience, where you said, you know what, I'm going to time and attention this versus just try and move it, you know?
So I mean, I agree 100%. You know, to to build muscle, it's not the guy with the strongest bench press that has the biggest chest. It's the guy that can break those cells down, incorporate fastness, those so-called fibers during the movement, and would copy the best to create better protein synthesis, to stimulate more growth, muscle, atrophy, right? And develop the area. Some of these guys are moving that weight around, but the purpose of moving the weight is to get her from point A to point B. So you notice those powerlifters out there that move the house, but they don't look like bodybuilders. They look completely different. And the bodybuilder to me is the more, the more athletic look, the more pleasing look, the better sculpted, the symmetrical, and appealing look. But powerlifters that look like big lumberjack guys that can just throw huge amounts of weight around. But that also is they're not looking just to stimulate the chest muscles. They're putting it back into it from underneath. They're using the shoulders, they're using the triceps. For chest, when you're training, you want to get everything else out of there and just start from point A to point B and break those muscle fibers down as huge.
Speaking about that, about isolation, we're really concentrating. Over the years, we've heard there's no such thing as spot reduction, right? I want to lose fat around the leg, I'm not just going to lose it there, it's overall. Was there ever a time in which you said, you know what, looking at yourself objectively in the mirror and you say, my delts are lacking, my lats are lacking. How did you grow or train that area knowing that you couldn't specifically only target that one area? Did you have a coach, a mentor, or did you just figure it out on your own?
I did a majority of everything on my own, but I did take that approach. And I wouldn't do it from how I looked in the gym. I would take it from show to show. So you're dieting down, you're dehydrated, and the problem is if you try to perfect your physique the way you look in the gym as opposed to how you look on stage, you're going to get two different outcomes. Because our bodies respond differently when we dehydrate and when we reduce our body fat for a show. There's some guys that there's body parts, they're just the first things to go. They might look great in the off season when you're fully hydrated and eating tons of calories and you're saturated. However, when you diet down, for me it was my arms. They were always the first thing to shrink down. So I knew, all right, so now in the off season, now I have to bring them up more than they are. I gotta overdo that, so if they do come down, then they're in proportion to the rest of my body. But if you think you're gonna be a top bodybuilder in a couple of years, you're foolish. This is a process to build muscle, even with gear. This is a long, lengthy, intense process. And you're looking to be the short term, you take up knitting or something else. And if you don't have the heart for this, and if you don't have, the mindset where you can, endure, years and years of self-mutilation, and masochistic tendencies to acquire, what you're looking for. So I would take one or two areas after a show. If it was a larger body part, chest, back, legs, something like that, then all right, I'm going to focus on one body part because it's really at that level, it's hard to really bring up two, in a 6 to 8 month time, unless it's too small body parts, So there was a time when my legs were overpowering, so I had to bring my shoulders a little wider to make them match my legs, and my shoulders become overpowering. I had to get my quad sweeps up a little bit, which legs were always easy. It was a good body part for me, calves too. But for the most part, it was always arms, so I could always primarily focus on arms. And I had a good stretch where they looked like they were diamond muscle for a few years, in my pro career.
I saw this one small clip where Ronnie Coleman had already retired. I'm talking about conditioning here, and specifically in posing. He had a group of like maybe 6, 7 guys, and he said, you know what, go ahead and do a lat spread, but hold it for 30 seconds. And they were like shaking and pouring sweat, and he's like, guys, it's only 30 seconds. Like, yeah, you look amazing, you look huge, you look shredded. You can't even hold a pose for 30 seconds. What was posing like for you, or how important was it for you, and how often did you train?
So, for us in that generation, posing was a portion of your judgment. I'm not sure the exact, we actually talked about this the other night. I believe it could have been anywhere between 15 and 20% of the scoring came from the posing round. So I was always that guy that wanted to look good on stage. I wanted to perform well. I wanted everything to flow well. I wanted to have good routines. I wanted to get the crowd into it. You want to build up your following, and you get the crowd behind you. So I always put time into that. But aside from that, posing routine round, you have the comparison round. And there was guys, they look great, they're in great condition, but they have no condition. So I would start 4 weeks out, I would train in the morning, do my cardio after, and I go right into the posing session. It would last about a half hour, and I'd start off, I'm not doing it for a while, holding each mandatory pose, and quarter turn pose for 15 seconds. I do my 4 quarter turns, front, left, right, back, rotate again, 3 rounds, and that would go into my compulsory pose, from bicep, from arm square, abs and thigh, side chest, like tricep, rear double bicep, rear lat square, abs and thigh, most muscle. So, and I would hold each pose for 15 seconds and do 3 rounds of that. I'd work at the 20 seconds, work at the 25, and I would work at the 30 to 45 seconds. Where I could sit and hold that shit with a smile on my face and not drop a beat of sweat.
And that's what would separate you from guys that look good and you're just smiling at each shit.
I remember 1 year, the year I went all the way heavyweight to the USA, it was me against Craig Richardson. Craig Richardson, the guy from New Jersey, was a great bodybuilder, very competitive, pushed me that year. And they called the last pose. It was close, it was a couple points away. And they called for the most muscular, and I'm hitting it. And he had to wind it up like 3 or 4 times. And he said, he's like, dude, how did you do that shit? But I just out-prepared him. It was stuff like that that gives you, gives you the edge.
That reminds me of the Kai Green and Phil Heath rivalry. That was probably my favorite rivalry in, I don't want to get, political or anything like that, but I think Kai should have won at least one of them. And I remember there was once where, maybe it was Sean Roden who did it, but Phil was posing and he was like out of breath and his gut was like kind of in check. And I think it was Sean Roden. Sean was just looking at him, and it was like, oh, like it got real crazy. But those guys, I think, for the optics, it was like they were rivals. But I think it commands so much respect to see, I'm doing this. This guy's doing the exact same thing that I'm going through, and we're both up here. We're both depleted. We're both.
Who wants it more?
Yeah, and so
that's your fight. I
heard someone, a friend of ours, Derek Asuna, talked about when he depleted during peak week, his feet, the soles of his feet hurt. He's like, bro, fat is being taken
sitting in his chair everywhere. Your tailbone would hit the chair, and your femurs and your glutes where they tie in, sitting into a chair too long would hurt.
Can you talk about peak week? How did you? I've heard guys that say, I'm chewing the ice. Like I'm just depleting just to get that, grainy look. Like what would you do?
There's a million ways to cross that finish line, right? And I've heard, eating ice, you shouldn't be cutting out water. You should be able to drink water with the ice, until it lasts. Depending on how you look, 12 to 24 hours. There are some guys that do it differently. There are some guys that cut their water 72 hours out and they slowly cut it out. There's some guys that don't cut it out at all. I would go through a carbohydrate depletion stage for 3 or 4 days. This was towards the end of my career, and then I would carb up. I'd have a heavy day, a moderately heavy day, and then I would do like a half carb day on Friday. And that was enough for me if my prejudgment was Saturday morning. There was times when I only carved up for 1 day because I didn't feel like I needed it. But every show is different. So your body is constantly, you never prepare for a show the same way twice. Your training might be the same, but you might have to tweak things because your body's not getting rid of the fat the rate you normally would. You're holding on to some excess water. There's other things in your system that aren't leaving as fast. There's so many variables. There's not a lot that you can count on as a control. So you have to know when you hit that wall, how to pivot and how to get around it. But for me, for the most part, I would do a depletion stage. There's times I went 0 carbohydrates. There's times I went low, just 50 grams a day for 3 or 4 days, and I would do, I think, 600 grams of carbs, and then 500 grams of carbs, and like 350 or 250 on a Friday. There was days my prejudgment was Friday, so I would just carb up for 2 days. So I'm fully carved up, and then I would just dehydrate the last 12 hours and just have protein, sip on water, and increase my sodium.
Man, yeah. Now talking about, after retiring, being, 30 plus, is, in your experience, is something like testosterone TRT therapy, is that something that maybe you've dabbled in or that you've heard good things about? Adverse effects, like what are your thoughts on that?
So, I've dabbled in a lot more than testosterone. Yeah.
I'm saying specifically for anyone that's...
So look, you know, at a certain age, all of our testosterone drops, and you know, there's health issues that come into play when people have low testosterone. You have active kids. You have active kids that eat shit. They eat junk food all day long. Have no problem with their triglycerides. Have no trouble with their sugar levels. Have no trouble with their cholesterol. Have no trouble with their blood pressure. Have high testosterone levels. Testosterone is a carrier. It's a catalyst for all these nutrients. It pushes fat in your blood to where it's supposed to be. It pushes sugar into your cells the way it's supposed to. Regulates hormones, okay? Keeps your brain functioning properly, keeps your hormones in check, right? It's the base of what makes a man a man. When he hits a certain age, right, and his testosterone levels slowly decline, they enter something called andropause. And it's something that happens to women just like menopause. Their estrogen level drops and their whole bodies change. So I'm a firm believer in testosterone therapy for men. Very strong advocate of that, and I recommend testosterone therapy for anybody. Now, the rate of testosterone that's healthy for the person, I think everybody should have, you know, testosterone levels of 1,000. There's some doctors who think that might be a little high, but that's a good, healthy range. You know, as long as you don't have a high hemoglobin level, you know, that's something you can easily monitor. As long as your iron count isn't too high, you know, eat a good, well-balanced diet, right? Take care of yourself, keep your hormones in check, and you'll be a lot healthier.
I think you were recommending earlier master injector here in McAllen, Texas.
They have one right here in McAllen, Texas, and be a master injector, and they do TRT, they do hormone replacement therapy, they do, you know, vitamins and glutathione, and they do stuff to fix people up.
Nice. That's something definitely to look into if you're an older athlete or just someone that wants to increase your test levels. Now, you mentioned you dabbled in some other stuff. When you have that high level of athleticism, everybody's eating the same, everybody's doing the same things, what's my competitive edge, right? Back then in the 90s, this is me assuming that things weren't as heavy as they are today. Today, you have TikTok where you have kids saying, I just did a trend cycle. And you're like, what the hell is this kid doing 17 on trend? Like, what are you doing? Was trend even a thing back then, or can you talk
about it? It was more early 2000s and up until like when I retired, you know, 2012, 13. You know, the drug game kind of maintained, you know, its range. You know, where you didn't take growth hormone until you were at least at a national level. You know, you didn't take the compounds and things in conjunction with one another until you're at a certain level.
Was that common knowledge, or is that something you asked around?
Well, the thing is, what people don't realize is the work ethic was much different back then. Completely different than it is now. Okay. Nowadays, back then, it's you want to join a gym, you want to eat, you want to put on muscle, and then then we'll start talking about steroids down the road. Now, these kids get a gym membership and they want to bottle testosterone to go with it, you know. But what people don't realize is your steroid receptor sites are in your muscles. So if you're not stimulating your muscle cells sufficiently, those receptor sites are not going to absorb the stuff that's flowing through your blood. And these kids are taking more and more stuff now because it's not working. Like you just talked about these kids that are taking stuff. Do they look like the people of yesterday?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Plus the levels are so high, so I'm like, what?
It's not being utilized.
Correct.
You know, so they have it all backwards. And, you know, blame the parents, blame whatever you want to blame, but at the end of the day, and then look, you know, that's the majority. And those are always the wannabes that want the path with the least resistance, you know. They want to earn their diploma online. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it wasn't around years ago. You know, like there was just a harder way to obtain things, and it brought value to it. Now everything is undervalued and not worth it. and actually more easily achievable. And we've made it that way. So what kids need to do is, if they're really looking to put on muscle, if they're just looking to fuck around, and just put a little extra work in and lay off the drugs until you're in your fucking 20s.
You hear the phrase thrown around, oh, he's big because he's on juice. And I'm thinking, man, I'm working as hard as I'm working, and I'm nowhere near these guys' size. I would have to think these guys are putting in twice the effort that I'm putting in. And even if they were on something, they still have to diet and say no to all sorts of food and time away from families and friends, whatever, because they have to train and travel and do all that. And I'm like, man, I don't think I have the willpower to do that. And I think they deserve a little bit more respect in their craft, because it is an art craft. I remember seeing Franco Colombo and Arnold, they were doing ballet to learn how to pose and stuff like that. And it's like, these guys are putting their lives for our entertainment. It's like, give them a little bit more respect. It's not just because they're objects, like they're working, and they're really working, busting their ass for that look. I don't know if you want to talk about your supplement line, I-Prevail, or is it I-Prevail?
I-Prevail Supplements.
Where did that name originate? Is that your own?
Yeah, it's my own.
Yeah.
Life is interesting. Nothing's comes easy, and I'm one of those guys that just have to work for everything else. I don't look for handouts, and I like doing things on my own. It's just my way. And I've been in some dark places, and I've been in some compromising positions, and through perseverance, and to believe it or not, bodybuilding is the one thing that kept me. Discipline was never a problem. I could wake up every morning at 5:30. I could eat my meals. I could do this. I could do what I have to do, and that's what keeps me straight. When I have something to train for, something to work, right? So it's not just a part of my life. It makes me what I am. And having that focus when I was going through my troubles, it kept me in line. It kept me in a path to where I am today. And I would always say to them, you're going to come out of this, you'll prevail, you do this. And it just kind of hit me one day. And I saw a picture of this girl running on the beach, and it said, prevail. I said, I should prevail, and just say I will. And the name just stuck.
That's powerful, man.
Yeah.
Where can, for those viewing, anybody's interested in purchasing, where can you purchase your supplements?
Well, if you're fortunate enough to live in the McAllen area, the Shack, supplement shakes, they got the line there. But if not, you can go to I-PrevailSubs.com, and they got everything on the site.
We'll link the site below.
Yeah.
Shout out to the Shack Supplements and Shape. Thank you, Lee Palacios, for letting us be in your private gym.
I trained here today. I got the job done here today.
Thank you, Jason, for spending some time with us today. Guys, make sure to follow him. What is your, do you have social media and Instagram?
I_Prevail Subs, and Facebook, just I-Prevail Subs.
Awesome. Thank you, guys, and we look forward to having you on the next episode. Jason, thank you, brother.